Hey, let's tell them about when we went to Chicago and met the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes.
That would be awesome.
Welcome to another episode of Our Haunted Travels with your hosts, Sean and Marianne Gauntlet.
Well, hello there, parapeeps, and welcome to another episode of Our Haunted Travels. I am your host, Sean Donnelly.
And I'm your co-host, Marianne Donnelly.
Hey, today we are at the Congress Plaza Hotel in Chicago. Did I say that right?
You did.
I did say that right.
Amazing.
Amazing. I've been saying it wrong all weekend. Sorry, folks. Anyways, we have a treat for you right now. We have sitting with us right now the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, Mr. Jeff Mudgett. Do you believe us? You don't? Well, watch. There he is, right
Hello,
there, folks.
everybody. How are you?
All right, so I am going to videotape you guys.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So, Jeff, it's been amazing with you this weekend. Just getting to actually meet you has been a treat, a treasure, and to get to go with you yesterday over to the site of the murder castle, it was amazing. And just to see your emotions, it was truly a highlight of the entire weekend, and quite frankly, my most recent life. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for the opportunity and for coming forward and doing all of these things for your family and for the victims of the infamous H.H. Holmes.
Well, thanks for joining me. It's always a treat for me to go, an historic treat to go back to see the location, because quite frankly, every time I go, I feel something different. And within minutes, even no matter how the size of the crowd, I quite frankly feel myself there at the site and trying to recover my emotions, try to sort some more of them out, because it's a tangled mess every time I'm there, and I think maybe you could see that on my face yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. You're like me, and you can't hide your emotions very well,
no.
and I do that all the time in school. When I'm telling a story, sometimes I'll get a little emotional, a little teary-eyed, and then I'm like, okay, I'm in front of all my kids. I've got to got to back off a little bit, but it was really amazing experience. But I did have a couple of questions for you as well, and hopefully you can answer some of them.
I'll do my best.
All right, so Bloodstains.
Yes.
I own 2 copies of that. I've had to, But how much of that is actually true? It says on the cover, based on a true story. How much of it is actually based in fact?
That caption on the cover has to do with my career and training as a lawyer, and there's been an argument in the literary world about authors filling in gaps in nonfiction works with imagination and creativity, and then still calling them nonfiction. And I've disagreed with that for decades now. Truman Capote started that with In Cold Blood. There are sections, even Eric Larson admitted doing so in The Devil in White City. There are sections in Bloodstains that I filled with my imagination, my belief what happened, but it's not validated. I can't prove that it's true, as in which prison guard he used to the conspiracy of his escape from execution and the burial, and then revisiting those that irritated him at trial. There's a lot of that I came to believe actually happened, but I can't prove. So rather than fool my readers, I decided to say, listen, this is based on a true story. Everything I'm here trying to write for you now is something I believe happened, but I can't prove it. Now you've got to take my word for this, take my hand, and come with me on this journey. And then if something later happens where one of the historians in Chicago decides they're going to do the years of research needed for almost every Holmes fact and finds out something I said wasn't quite verbatim, then I'll be able to say, I told you all, I couldn't prove it all, and I did my best. So that's what the caption's about.
Okay.
So if percentage-wise, 75%, 75, 80%, I'd be willing to put a stamp of my approval on right now is true.
Okay. And the letters down in the basement that you found, is that part true?
We found material in the basement, all right? The letters are part of a packet that I'm going to withhold until we get to excavate, all right? And I'm going to attempt to use those letters that we found in the motion to the judge in D.C., trying to talk him into giving him his approval or her approval for the excavation. So that's why I held those back.
Letters were found though.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there's a, depending on who you talk to and all the different research, there's a lot of different numbers of potential murders by H.H. Holmes.
Yeah.
What's your number? You know, they go from like 3 to, I've heard, over 200.
Yeah.
What's your, based on all your research and everything you've done, what's your best guess?
This gets into theories about what kind of expert Holmes was. I personally believe he was a medical doctor, he was a chemist, he was a pharmacist, he had trained with a mortician. If anyone could eliminate the remains after a murder, it was him. He even set up the basement of his hotel that way so that he could strip the flesh, remove it, and then articulate the skeleton and sell it. I'm confident that he killed at least 13, all right? Which makes him a serial killer. The historic definition of mass murder, I think, is 20 and above. I think that's how the numbers work. I don't quite know who decided that, but that's what they say. I wouldn't be surprised. I know the number that everyone uses, that 27 that he threw out, that was a lie that Holmes gave during his confession in prison. He threw out a number. I don't even know if it had any basis in reality whatsoever. But I wouldn't be surprised if the number, when we excavate and we have DNA testing for human remains, I wouldn't be surprised if the number there was another 10 or 20. And then if we ever get to check the glass factory and the cement factory here in Chicago, maybe more there. So realistically speaking, I don't think it's 200, all right? Realistically speaking, it's not 3. So maybe, you know, if I was gonna 30 or 40, that's what I'd say.
So you were a proponent of believing that your great-great-grandfather was also Jack the Ripper.
Yes.
What was that first thing that drew you to believe that?
Well, I was writing Bloodstains, working, researching everything I could about the legend and the lore. And a fellow named Mark Potts contacted me from Pennsylvania. And Mark had been studying the connection between Holmes and the Ripper for decades. And he had come to the conclusion that Holmes was the Ripper. He had done some handwriting analysis, had some experts check the facts on, or his basis of his theory. And it come out with some interesting facts and data. When he contacted me, I had the same reaction that everyone does the first time they hear someone say H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. I doubted it. I didn't believe it. I thought he was a crackpot. Okay? But there was something about the one handwriting comparison he showed me. I'd done handwriting comparisons in court where I'd hired an expert to say, yes, this is the same, and an expert to say, no, this isn't. You can find either in a criminal trial with handwriting analysis. It's easy. But there was a portion of the handwriting on Dear Boss, which Mark showed me, laid over a letter that Holmes had written to his lawyer complaining about London. That he didn't like London because he couldn't find his favorite newspaper there, the New York Herald. Which I thought was a fairly strange comment to be writing to your lawyer. It wouldn't be one that he would create out of fiction for any particular reason that I could find. But when Mark showed me how those yours truly laid over each other, they were positively exact. It was as if a man had graphically laid over a piece of glass with the engraving and then redone the yours truly again. It was stunning. So I took those comparisons to a company in the University of Buffalo, which called Cedar Fox, which I knew the FBI and CIA and Scotland Yard used to do their handwriting comparisons. They are the best. And they have a computer program which they practically guarantee in court when they go up to testify on a murder trial. And I was surprised to find out they were willing to help me on this, because when you deal with Jack the Ripper, it's a huge political issue. And people rarely have an open mind about it. They have made up their mind, as you heard Vince yesterday say, he thinks Francis Tumblety is the Ripper. You know, you'll have the historians here in Chicago that wrote the Holmes book say it's Aaron Kosminski was the Ripper. That everyone has their name. When the fellas at Cedar Fox came back with their data, it came back with a 97% number, which I knew it was going to, having seen with my own eyes the overlay. And if you'll remember, I used that overlay at my TED Talk in Vancouver in front of thousands of people. And when I explained to the crowd the handwriting expert opinions, the computer numbers, and then just stepped back, and the people at TED overlaid those yours truly on this huge screen behind me in front of these people, and I turned to them and said, you don't need an expert, you don't need a computer, what is that? And they had a stunned silence on their face. They all realized it was the same. It hadn't been copied. This was letters. These were letters years apart. So once I saw that, I knew there was more than just some wives' tales. And then we started researching Holmes being in London, Holmes buying insurance in London, and the intrigue of his story about how he could have possibly, when he went to London, seen all the papers about the first two murders, wanted to get involved, knowing that he had a ticket home that he could get away from it. It was kind of like a hobby, I thought. And, we've continued on with it from there. And to tell you the truth, I think the mystery solved, the case is closed. I don't know if I'll get the world to ever agree with me on that. Although now with American Ripper, Holmes is the #1 suspect for Jack the Ripper around the world with English-speaking people.
All right. Out of all the research that you've done into Holmes, Jack the Ripper, whatever, what have you uncovered that you found personally most shocking? So there's a lot of shocking things about it, but what did you find most shocking?
What I let you go through yesterday, Clara's journal. Clara visiting Philadelphia when he was in prison. Clara then visiting Chicago after the alleged execution. No one has ever found out what happened to the Holmes quote-unquote fortune or any of his assets. What historians do in Chicago is they say he was broke. The man wasn't broke. Clara lived a very wealthy life after. Bought a fabulous house. All right. I believe that she had power of attorney. She was still his legal wife. He told her where the accounts were, where the assets were to be found, and she came to Chicago, picked them up, achieved the money he needed for his conspiracy, which I still believe happened. I tried to explain some last night during the show about how we now have other networks interested in my theory that it wasn't Holmes who we exhumed. The DNA wasn't a match. So I'm excited about that. And then once we proceed with that, I'm going to dig deeper into this more complicated relationship between Clara and Herman than previous books have led on to. One of the director during the show was very interested in the Clara story, but we didn't have time for another episode regarding Holmes's wives, who we both believed played a major part in his frauds.
So you mentioned the exhumation and the DNA. You didn't really expect the DNA to be a perfect match, did you? I mean, I'm a biology teacher by day, and it shouldn't be a perfect match to any of your relatives. It should be a partial match anyway. What percentage were you hoping for? Since you're saying it wasn't a match, they did suggest that it was a relative. What makes you...
That thing that it was a relative is a cop-out, I think, on the part of King's College and the scientists at UPenn. there's not a conspiracy, there's not a fraud to lie to the American people or the world. But when we dug the body up and the skull was removed, taken to UPenn, cleaned up, I at that time knew in my heart it was Holmes, okay? When they showed me the skull and the dental work, and then the scientists at UPenn described it as the most pristine exhumation they'd ever seen the skull because of the concrete sarcophagus that it was in, all right? I mean, we had an intact brain inside the skull. They explained to me, because of the direct paternal line from me to my great-great-grandfather, that the DNA would be very easily tested and compared. So, I mean, they thought actually the DNA testing was a waste of time, a waste of money. But over the summer, they couldn't get any results. They tested, they retested, couldn't get any results. When the show came out, and they explained that, you know, based on dental work and DNA, they think this was H.H. Holmes. I called and I said, you know, I'd like to see those results you're talking about. Well, we don't have them yet. And I said, well, I need to see those. Those are the families. You know, that's part of the court order. And when they came back from King's College, there were gaps. There were actual holes in the DNA analysis. And it's quite doubtful. And, you know, I've asked many experts about it. And they've told me that had I them in court and they had to testify based on those results, they could not stand before a jury, raise their hand and say, this is a match. So I've got questions, and I want to dig a little deeper. Excuse the pun. Excuse the pun. Excuse the pun.
So you were the one who actually found that the brain was still intact.
I was there.
I just have to ask, because I would have done it. Did you put your fingers in the Foreman Magnum and touch it?
No. No.
She's sick. I'm sorry,
No,
man. She's sick.
That's over the top, my dear.
I would have done it as a biology teacher. I'd be like, oh my
But
gosh, that's
I'll give you an
great.
interesting story about it.
Okay.
I was holding the skull and it flopped in my hand. And the film crew's going. We got audio teams and the scientists are there and the directors. He's trying to figure out what to do with the whole thing. And it flopped in my hand. I said, Janet, that's Dr. Munn, she's the Nobel Prize winning scientist at the University of Pennsylvania, anthropology. And I said, Janet, what's this? She goes, what, Jeff? They had a lady that worked on the team that you called Jeff Whisperer because I was a pain in the tail during the production. But so I said, it's flopping in my hand. She goes, no, it's not, Jeff. You're imagining that. Your imagination is doing it again, Jeff. I said, well, here. So she came over, grabbed it, and it flops in her hand. So the two scientists converge on this thing. They roll it over, and they check inside, and there's an intact brain. And I asked, how is that possible? I still haven't got a satisfactory answer.
See, I did an archaeological dig where I exhumed 117 bodies over the course of
Wow.
2 years from a graveyard from 1804. And I was just a volunteer. I'd never had any training. I learned on the job. And their bodies were horridly preserved. The best thing was their teeth, some of the skull, some of the long bones, but if you tried to take the long bones out of the ground, they would just disintegrate away. I mean, we had a tough time. I know that it has to do with how well preserved and encased it was, because we were told at our site, you know, it was the freezing and thawing of the ground, the freezing and thawing over the years that damages that bone that much and makes everything, you know, dissipate and break down so much. So I'm not surprised. But what else did you find in the grave besides the skull?
His hat, mustache, boots. Strange enough, he didn't have pants, which the scientists explained as that had whoever was there when they were hung, they might have lost control of their bodily functions and they removed the pants for decency purposes. We found a silver cross with H.H. Holmes, which I found very interesting. Why would you go to eternity with H.H. Holmes rather than your real name after just begging forgiveness to the Catholic Church and being forgiven, okay, being baptized? I found that very interesting. And that's still at the University of Pennsylvania. You can see that. that cross. We donated that to the museum.
I hear
I will
another
have
road
to-
trip.
Yeah, we'll have to go check that
Oh,
out.
you both would love to. I recommend you both filming a show walking through their museum. Okay.
Well, anything else that you would like to share?
I can tell you this: the show last night was my first attempt at assuming the character of Holmes in wardrobe, and actually talking to a group of people as, trying my best. Honestly, I'm not an actor. It's.
Oh, you did fine.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was strange. It was eerie. There were periods of time when I was enjoying it, and there were periods of time when I was very guilty about doing it, and being guilty about enjoying it and seeing you all enjoying me doing it, and all of us knowing in the room who this man was and what he had done to these innocents. But I always fall back on, I think the more knowledge we gain about him, I think he's the most fabulous character to study regarding the extremes of human nature and character and personality that maybe has ever lived. And I think we need to do more about it. And I think he's the one. And I think my family after him, not following in his footsteps in any way. They're good, God-fearing, tax-paying American patriots, war heroes. None of them did that, despite having that DNA, those genes. Pretty much sets aside all the theories we've ever read about passing on the genes of a serial killer or a psychopath. And I think we need to put more work into it.
Well, I want to thank you and look forward to the next chapter in this whole saga.
Well, thanks for coming to the show. It was a pleasure. Whenever I was having trouble up on stage, when I needed some concrete to gather my footing, I'd look at you both over and,
Oh, thank you.
gain some footing.
Thank you
So
very much.
thanks for
I
coming. Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
It's an honor.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Sean.
guys.
Alrighty. Thank you, sir.
If you like this video and like to see more in the future, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and give us a like below. Also, if you have any comments or suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comment section. Thanks for watching this episode of Our Haunted Travels.